Well, it's towards the end of August here, getting into early September. A lot of hunting seasons are starting to begin. And boy, can't wait to get out to the stand for opening day. But there's something magical about the rut, even to the point where, you know, here in Minnesota, we have some big bucks we're watching. We have some big named bucks. I'm really hoping to shoot one. But there'd be almost a little bit of disappointment if I shoot one of those big bucks early and I can't participate in the rut here as far as actually going out and hunting and hearing that crunchy leaves, that big step of a giant coming my way during the rut. And I always love the rut. And 2020 whitetail rut forecast, I have delivered a whitetail rut forecast going back to 2016 and then before that in writing, but in videos. And I wanted to talk about some of the rules of the rut and really looking at these rules and understanding how they play into your success of the rut and the rut going forward. And I want you to have a great rut. I want you to have a great forecasting your sits, getting into a tree stand safely, and making sure that you're getting the most use out of your time. And there's several rules I want to go over. And I'm going to start with one I put down here, number 4. I just mentioned this real quick. The whitetail rut takes place in your area every single year, but we're going to talk about why you might see a difference from one year to the next. We're going to talk about the timing of those bucks that are coming in and how that plays and where you should sit and how you can expect a great hunt. First off, most important, we're going to talk about the first rut, the second rut, some different strategies. But first off, weather. The weather does not dictate the timing of the rut. It does not move does into estrus. It does not make the breeding actually take place, but what it does is it facilitates better breeding windows during the daylight or not. For example, today right now it's 85 degrees. It's humid. If this was on November 7th, rutting would still be taking place in this location in southeast Minnesota. But a lot of that activity would take place at night. Just like humans, deer don't want to move around when it's 80 degrees, 70 degrees and get all heated up. There's been lots of studies that show a difference on trail cams and daylight movement below 50 degrees versus above 50 degrees. But weather plays a huge role in when you can expect the best days to hunt during the rut. And I'm excited this year. I want to talk about this. I don't talk a lot about products. The products I use, I believe in. We put out 208 videos this year on YouTube, and you'll see us use the products a lot. 198 last year. You see it. We don't have to beat them to death, the product names or anything like that. Obviously, if I use it, I believe in it, or I wouldn't use it, or I wouldn't even take it as a sponsor, partner, anything. But one thing that I can talk about is HuntCast. That's coming out with HuntWise. And what I like about this, they're not just a partner, a sponsor, that type of thing. I helped develop the weather algorithm. I infused 30 years of my experience. Everything that I've written about, all the previous videos about how to use the weather when you hunt, I've infused that information into this algorithm. It's the same algorithm that I published in the 2015 issue of Outdoor Life, the November Whitetail Rut issue. It was the main article in that magazine at that time in 2015, and it talked about this weather algorithm. So I'm going to talk about this a lot in videos to come because it's a part of me. It's a part of my business. This is me infusing my knowledge into that. 30 years of use, 30 years of success shooting bucks every single year using the weather. My algorithm and those bucks that I've shot, they're in that 8 out of 10 day, 7 out of 10 day, almost all of them. That's how I hunt. And using the weather has helped me manage my time. And I'm just gonna say that right off the bat. Using your weather to help you hunt was born because when I had small kids, when I had that younger family, and I could only hunt for 2 or 3 days at a time, then I had to make sure I was using my time wisely. I had to make sure that it was a better weather day on a Friday or a Monday if I was going to take a long weekend. I even had the times where I took one day off during the week. I went down after work on a Tuesday because there was an incredible weather front that was going through on Tuesday. I hunted that high quality day on Wednesday, 7-hour drive down, 7-hour drive back. I was back Wednesday night, in fact, early in the morning, so I could take the kids to school or babysitter, and that's how I hunted. I had to manage my time. I found out quickly that using the right days to hunt, where it was a great 1 or 2 or 3 days, was way better than taking a week off and wasting 3 or 4 of those days. Sure, you're not wasting time, you're in the woods, you're having fun, you're taking time off work, it's relaxing. But when I want to go whitetail hunting and I want to actually shoot something, kill something, I want to make sure the weather's on my side, and it's what I've used going back to the late 80s, early 90s, and that is incredibly important. HuntCast has that for you and will deliver it at a level that no other weather prediction or prediction model for deer hunting will give you in the whitetail industry. This will change the way you hunt, and that's what people have told me for years. Been doing this for 10 to 12 years, putting predictions out online and letting people know what days are the best. But they've told me that it's changed the way they hunt for the rest of their lives. And if you follow that and you can go back whitetail rut forecast. You can look up whitetail rut hunting formula. Look up that on YouTube, Google. You'll find a lot of this stuff going back for many years. That's how I hunt. I recommend to YouTube, but it'll help you manage your time. We're going to talk about weather down here, how it's going to help you manage your hunt, and that's what's most important. We'll get right into it with core buck pre-rut. Something I want you to follow. You're not going to see rutting activity for the most part to a very high degree if you don't have mature bucks. So if you have mature bucks, you're usually going to see that pre-rut be very active. You're going to see a lot of rubs and scrapes laying down. You're going to see that activity, and that explains why someone 5 miles away in the same state, same region, maybe even a similar type of property, is not seeing rutting movement because they simply do not have those bucks available to actually hunt. Core buck pre-rut. Great time to hunt mornings. That's the first time I really hit the mornings. I go through the October lull, I go through opening day. I start to place a priority on that morning hunt severely during that time. And we'll see it on our trail cameras. It's kind of interesting. A trail cam on a water hole. 800 photos over an entire middle of September to the middle of October. And 90% of those are when deer are leaving their dry bedding areas. They're on the way to an evening food source. They hit the water hole, and that's a great time to hunt bucks on a water hole in the early season, middle of rut when it's warm. They're hitting that water, but something happens when they feed all night. They feed all night on green vegetation. That quenches their thirst. They don't need to hit that water hole in the morning. So what we saw, as soon as it gets into the pre-rut, which would be southeast Minnesota, southwest Wisconsin, southern Michigan, upstate Pennsylvania, southern New York, somewhere in there, in that line, maybe even northern Ohio, you'll start to see deer, especially bucks, hitting water holes in the middle of the morning, midday, middle of the afternoon, because they're starting to put some miles on and they get thirsty. Just watch your trail cameras on a water hole. That'll tell you when the pre-rut begins in your area. It's around October 20th, and we're always going to go back to the weather, because if it's an 80-degree day, you're not going to get that rutting activity during the day. It's too hot for them to move around. However, when you have those cold front times, it's October 22nd, 23rd, 28th, those first cold fronts past the 20th of October in those locations like I talked about. If you're in southern Illinois, southern Indiana, southern Ohio, maybe northern Kentucky, that line, you're going to see that more towards the first part. The pre-rut's going to happen right around the 1st of November, say a week to 10 days later than the upper Midwest. And then if you're down in Tennessee, over in West Virginia, Arkansas, locations like that, you're going to see that even a little bit later. I see in Kansas, you're looking at pre-rut more like November 5th, November 10th. And when you get into areas of the southeast especially, you might have trickled ruts, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, that take place all the way in through January. So that's going to be a different area for you. But look for that core buck activity and don't miss it. If you have a buck, a local buck that's hitting your land around daylight shooting hours, you can't miss the pre-rut, because he's going to be putting on the miles in the morning, and that's often the best time to kill him. About half my bucks, archery bucks, rut bucks going back, have been taken before the end of October. About half have been taking more of the peak rut well into November, November 4th, 5th, 1st, whatever it might be. But don't miss out on the pre-rut. A lot of times hunters are taking vacation more the first 7 days, 9 days, that first week of November, and they're really missing out on some outstanding October 20th, 24th, 25th opportunity for big bucks. We always missed it in the back in the day. It's going back 12, 15 years. We traveled down to Wisconsin. We were around there around the 15th. We'd go every other weekend. And the next time we'd come down for our rut hunt, we'd have a 4 or 5 day rut hunt. And again, we'd plan that around the cold temperatures if we could. And we're looking at the weather. But we'd come down the 1st of November, and man, we were down here on the 15th or 20th. We come back 2 weeks later, and there's rubs and scrapes everywhere. Now all of a sudden there's 30 scrapes. There's 50 rubs. They're everywhere. And we missed something. And we've learned to not miss that something every single year. And that's called the pre-rut. And where I'm typically, again, hunting in the pre-rut is I'm focusing on mornings, and I'm sitting till 1 or 2 in the afternoon because you'll see it's a great morning. If it's a cold morning, let's say it's 27 degrees, 29 degrees, and it's warming up to a high of 52, a lot of times it's still in the 30s by noon, low 40s, great rutting conditions. And then what you find in the pre-rut, it's not an all-day time to sit in a tree stand. They're taking a break in the afternoon. Again, this isn't full-blown rut. The mature bucks are ready, the does often are not, or there's just 1 or 2 that have come into heat. So they're taking a break during the daytime, and then there's a little bit of flurry in the afternoon, evening, an hour before dark. Unlike the morning where they might move 5-6 hours a day, we're placing a priority on that because the timing and the amount of time that bucks are on their feet is much higher during the morning. And in the afternoon, evening, you're looking for about an hour right before dark to hit them. Maybe take a break, maybe go have some lunch, play some pool with some buddies, do something else with the family, whatever. But not a time to sit all day in the stand, unlike the peak rut. The peak rut. The peak rut features whether it's a core buck that's been around and you're just narrowing them down, you can have that movement, or it's a non-core buck. That non-core buck meaning he lives a mile or 2 away, and in his core buck area where he lives, in his habitat, he's going to breed 1 or 2 does really easy. He's got does around him, food, cover, that's where he feels safe, that's his core fall hangout, maybe even a portion of the winter time too. And then that's when he's told you with trail cam pictures for maybe 2-3 years that he's going to be back during the rut. You get those random daylight pictures. Well, on that non-core buck, core buck, he's around half the time during that peak rut. And that would be, let's say in that upper Midwest time, you're looking at early November and mid-November up until that time, and then it really slows down quickly. But he's told you that he's going to be there. But when you look at those first 15 days in November, you already have the pre-rut. You get into that time frame, there might only be 2 or 3 good weather days where he's going to cruise. He's not going to come from 2 miles away when the winds are 40 miles an hour and it's 70 degrees during the day on November 8th. But on November 10th, when it's a high of 37 and a major front went through on the 8th and the 9th, you can bet that's going to be the one time you can count on him showing up on your property all season long. And he's been telling you about it for 2 or 3 years if you've been paying attention to your trail cameras and scouting and seeing that sign that's coming up. Core buck, you can shoot any time during there. I'm looking in the peak rut. You can have movement all day. And we'll add something in here in a second, but the peak rut, they're active. They're looking for their next doe. They only breed 3 or 4 on average for that peak rut time frame. That might be 4 or 5 days in between does, 6 or 7 days. But at some point, they're moving morning a lot. Remember, to me, it relates to that weather and especially that temperature. If it's cooler in the morning, they'll move a lot more. At some point, they might need to take a break. But peak rut, you can expect movement all day. I'm looking at morning bedding area movement, staying away from those food sources, not spooking deer off those food sources, or you're going to ruin your morning hunt, getting back in the bedding areas, coming in the back door, getting in that area. And then the peak rut, or middle of the day, I'm looking for rut cruising between bedding and feeding areas. A lot of times a really good morning stand takes advantage of midday opportunity too. And then believe it or not, most stands are not all day sit stands, because if you have that great morning stand that relates to bedding, deer are leaving that bedding position and they're heading to food and they're going away from your position in the afternoon, evening before dark. So a lot of times, now you might have that perfect stand that's at X of movement where it's between bedding, it's between feeding, and you can expect all day movement, either deer coming from food, to food, cruising during the midday in cover. And there are those occasional stands like that. We have about 15 to 20% of our stands that are rut stands are like that, but not a very high percentage. A lot of times I'm flipping around from that morning stand, sitting it till 1, 2 in the afternoon. If it gets dark at 6, I'm flipping around to an evening stand if I can safely do so without spooking deer. And it's all about maximizing your time. Whether it's core buck, peak rut, you're looking at scoring the day. Peak rut, I'm scoring morning, midday, afternoon, get 30 points. Look at it as a 10 out of 10. Is this stand a 10 out of 10 if you're sitting there in the middle of the day? A stand that's a 10 out of 10 in the morning is often a 0 out of 10 in the afternoon, because again, deer are leaving your position. They're going towards food. It's the same with pre-rut. You're scoring that morning, scoring that evening. Are you in locations where a buck will move to food during daylight hours during the pre-rut, but only during that last hour? It means you have to be closer to a bedding area instead of the peak rut, where you might be closer to food source and see some movement all afternoon, as long as it's a remote area that you can sit in for an evening hunt, where they're going to move a little bit more during the peak rut. Let's talk about the rut lockdown phase. That's between the pre-rut and the peak rut. That's a tough thing, because in that pre-rut, bucks are ready, does aren't. But all of a sudden, 7 to 10 days in, towards around November 1st in that upper Midwest area, November 15th in Kansas, November 10th, November 7th in southern Ohio, southern Indiana, Illinois, then you're looking at an explosion of does, a high percentage coming into heat, and that means every buck is invited to the party. They're all getting a chance to participate in the rut and breeding. And even if it's hot, they're still going to breed at night. The breeding still happens, but you might see a sharp reduction in use. And we see that in southwest Wisconsin, even over in here in Minnesota, it'd be the same thing, but we're going to see a drastic reduction in that rutting activity the first 3 or 4 days in November, and then it explodes again. Not to say it's not a good time to hunt. You're focusing on long range funnels, movement, especially movement between bedding areas. You're waiting for that buck that just finished with his first doe to leave her and go look for another. And that's that rut lockdown phase. Might be longer hours on the stand. Again, I like those all day stands where you're between feeding, you're between bedding in a secure location where a buck might come off a doe at 2 in the afternoon, he's looking for his next one. That's the rut lockdown phase. Plan for that, notice it. A lot of people say it's November 2nd, well, the rut hasn't begun. Well, it probably began October 22nd, good cold front activity. You all of a sudden see a flurry of rubs and scrapes. Deer were active, you didn't have your vacation planned. All of a sudden it's early November, you're in the rut lockdown phase, and you're not really seeing a lot of appreciable rut activity till around the 5th of November. In the upper Midwest here, by the 10th of November, you can see a drastic reduction. And my son Sam, he shot a really nice buck on November 9th or 10th last year in southwest Wisconsin, and he was pretty ruddy looking for does in the evening. But boy, somewhere around the 14th of November to 18th of November, it really shuts down. Last year, the opening day of gun season was on November 23rd. Everyone's complaining about the DNR, the regulations, whatever else, your neighbors, blaming everyone but themselves. But on opening day of gun season, when it's the 23rd of November, you're well past the rut. You're just not going to see that rutting activity. In fact, the bucks are really recuperating at that time and recovering, and they're just sitting around doing nothing, a lot of times not even moving during the daylight. Number 4, that's some timing of the peak rut. You're focusing on evening food source movement, morning bedding area movement, between bedding areas, between doe bedding areas, whatever it might be. And then number 4, the rut takes place at the same time every year. I'm sorry if you came to this video to watch that the buck activity is going to happen at this time this year, different than last year or the year before. That's not the case. It happens the same time in your location every single year. You might see a big difference if you have mature bucks from one year where you see it earlier and you don't have mature bucks another year. You'll see a huge difference if we have a warm weather rut where it's volatile winds, warm winds, high winds during the rut. You're not going to see a lot of movement during the daylight hours compared to a year that has a lot of volatility for cold fronts coming through, and you're going to find a lot of peaks and valleys of rut movement, and it's a great time to be in the woods still. You know, the rut is a fun time. I'm going to hunt it if it's a warm rut or a cold rut, but you can bet, even during a warm rut, it's all relative, the temperature. So when it drops from 75 down to 65, still a great time to hunt, no different than if it's dropping from 45 to 35. You're still experiencing those same weather conditions that brought that drop in temperature in the first place, which is usually high winds, some type of extreme weather, and all those serve to build up a great rut for you. So hopefully we have a cold rut this year, but bottom line is, it doesn't matter where you're at, the rut happens at the same time every single year. You need to understand that rule, and if you do, it'll help you going forward and being a better hunter. Number 5, the roller coaster of weather opportunity. This is very important. There's going to be great days during the rut. I would say, let's just say a 15-day period, you're going to have 3 or 4 high quality, really high quality days that you have to be in the woods in your favorite stand. There's going to be a few days in the middle, and you're going to have a few days that just stink. And on those days, might be your vacation, might be the time to get in the woods. I suggest you really learn to manage your hunt. If you're on public land and you have a great rut cruising funnel, maybe even on private land, it's the only stand you have, well, then you can hit it every day, just hoping that a buck will come through. But if you're going after a target buck, specific bucks, if you're really trying to play, you've scouted all year, you narrow it down to a buck you want, you're going to be very careful on going into a certain stand for a certain buck, because he's only going to be moving by that when it's really good weather. I save my best stands for the best weather days. I might still go out and sit off to the side. It might be when I go sit with Diane, one of the boys, have some fun, still in the woods, but at the same time, I'm placing a high priority on those really good hunt cast, forecast days. Again, check out HuntWise, you have to. And really what I do is I work every day. Dylan and I are still putting out, we put out 208 videos. We're still putting out 4 videos a week. Dylan has his own things to do. I have mine. Still try to finish a book this year. We're scheduling clients. I go to 125 clients is what I've gone through from mid-December. And I finish up in Ohio this year in September. It'll be 125 clients during those 10 months. So I'm busy. There's always something to do, let alone taking care of the properties that we hunt, whether it's on our leased land or private land or my public land hunts. I want to maximize my hunts. I want to make sure that roller coaster weather is defining that I'm managing the best areas to get in the woods, and I'm making sure that I have great sits, and I'm prioritizing the time that I can actually get in the woods. And a lot of times nowadays where I can pick and choose when I hunt, then I'm picking those best days, but it's helping me manage my work and home life too. You know, it does you no good to plan a week off when you can break that time up. You know, and the best thing to do that I can encourage you to do, and this is what I've always done going back to when I worked in banking, real estate appraisal, and now in whitetail in the hunting industry, is it doesn't matter what business I was in or who I was working for. I always tried to slant my days, meaning that I can take a long weekend, and my supervisor, I'd let them know, you know, we'd get this weekend approved, and I'd just plead with them, can I take Friday off or Monday and let you know the beginning of that week? And most places will allow you to do that, and there's a lot of reason to slant it towards one day or the other based on the weather, based on the HuntCast forecast, and that'll lead you to success. There's a lot of times someone can take off a random day during the week. If you look at that, you can look at about 7 to 10 days out. This isn't something that magically pops up 2 days. You should be able to see this 7 to 10 days out. The big weather makers you can see because they involve major jet stream changes in the entire weather across the United States. You can see that 7 to 10 days out. So you need to be really eyeballing that and making sure that you're seeing that in the forecast. We can let you know that with HuntCast out a long ways. You can plan your hunts, and then it gets down to you can't miss that Wednesday. Literally, I would drive 14 hours to hunt one day, and that was worth more to me than a long weekend if that long weekend was warm in the middle of the rut. I'd rather hunt one perfect cold day than hunt a weekend of warm weather, and that's that roller coaster of weather that I'm watching and I'm hunting. I'm hunting those peaks where it's the best, and I'm doing other whitetail work or spending time with family when it's the worst. And that's how you can do this. Was born out of saving you time, making sure that your time's valuable, that you're not wasting time. Again, being out in the woods is never a waste of time, but if you're whitetail hunting, instead of burning out your stands, go for a hike, go grouse hunting, go fishing. A lot of times when it's bad whitetail weather, it's great fishing weather. So keep that in mind. There's always something else you can do, and even manage your boss, your career, your family, your spouse, your kids. Always something you could do to manage your whitetail hunting, and that's what this is born out of. Not that I had all the time in the world to hunt. In fact, it was the opposite. I had to maximize the little bit of time that I did have, and that's how I made sure that I'm getting on mature bucks every single year for the past 35 years, making sure that I chose the best days to hunt, not the most days. Number 6, the rut, 2020 whitetail rut. The forecast of this rut, it's always the same. It's a marathon, not a sprint. There's an incredible amount of opportunity. Around here, just looking at in Wisconsin, and it's gonna be the same in your state, especially in most of the Midwest, Northeast, Upper Midwest, even down to Arkansas, Tennessee, where you get the traditional ruts, and maybe not as much as in Alabama, Georgia, Florida, where you get that trickle rut over several months. But there's a huge marathon of opportunity. But I'm looking at, we're starting to really start to look at rut stands, especially morning rut stands around October 20th. And then we're looking at that rut winding down about the 17th. So almost a month of a rut. At 3.5 weeks is a really good amount of time to actually hunt. And then you have that marathon of opportunity. It doesn't pay to burn out your stands in early October, September, that you're going to be hunting in the rut, especially if you're trying to narrow it down to a core buck that's around, you can hunt all the time, or a non-core that you need to hunt during the peak of the rut. There's the second rut. The second rut, critical. Look at that time when all those does are coming into heat, and there's an overabundance of does coming into heat, and every buck's invited to the party. Fast forward 28 days to early December, and that's when we're shooting our secondary bucks. Last year with my muzzleloader, buck's coming down, chasing a doe onto a food plot. He's curling back into the cover. There's also a fight in the woods right before that between two bucks. I was really excited. He's lip curling, and I shot him at about 175 yards with a muzzleloader. The year before, Dylan and I were in a stand, and we had all of a sudden, we're in the secondary rut. We're facing a ridge system where we can only see about 40 yards. And I remember talking to Dylan, kind of like we both were talking, boy, if it happens, it's just gonna happen fast. And sure enough, doe comes up over the top of the ridge, bucks on her tail, end up shooting at him 25 yards. And that was another story. If you look up secondary rut hunting, secondary rut morning hunting, you can look that up. But the most missed time in the woods is that time, and there's hardly anybody in the woods at that time. Don't miss the second rut. Always go about 28 days, just a month past that time when there's that rut lockdown. In the upper Midwest, you're really focusing on the first week of December, maybe in the first 2 weeks. It's gonna be a more random opportunity, that secondary rut. I love hunting the mornings, and then you can't be at an evening food source during that time. So I'm really placing an even amount of time and hunt in those areas. And, you know, really manage your time, learning where to hunt so that you can pick those best weather days and hit those times. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. There's plenty of opportunity going in the second rut. And please, folks, check out HuntCast. You will be very happy with it this year. And oh, by the way, they have the best mapping service and features in the country out of any app. And so it's a great combination for those pro and especially the elite users in that package. And again, I wouldn't push it so hard, but I'm a part of that product. This is 30 years of my use of the weather to determine when I hunt. I literally, in the Thumb area of Michigan, back in the day in '95, I would go on my way to the stand in the morning. I'm traveling there, it's 45 minutes to get over on the other side of Cass City from where I was at, and in Unionville. I'm on that way. I finally get the marine forecast. The Oakland Press from downstate had said the weather was gonna be good, these winds, but you know, the newspaper, who knows. I'm listening to the marine weather on the way there. I'm halfway to the stand, can't wait to get there, hunting a certain stand, certain buck, certain wind, and it's all the opposite. I turn around, literally go back, sleep in, and wait 2 or 3 days later, go into that stand and shoot the buck I'm after because the weather's right. Exercise some patience, learn to play the roller coaster, learn to manage your time by the weather. It'll lead you in the right direction. And last but not least, wait, it is least the moon. It's not going to tell you anything. What I use the moon for, honestly, there's 2 things. And one of them is deer hunting related, is that, or I guess they both are, but I look at with a full moon rising, then I'm looking at a really good priority in the afternoon. Deer feed 5 times in a 24-hour period. That means if one cycle they feed heavy, the next cycle they feed light, and you'll have that roller coaster of feeding opportunity. When the full moon's rising, they're living high on the hog all night, 2 feedings, eating a lot of activity. They're tired at daybreak when they're in that first feeding of the day. In that second feeding, late morning, is going to be that perfect time where you can go into a stand and expect to capitalize on a rut hunt with the moon. And last, I use a flashlight when it's a dark moon. I don't use a flashlight when there's a full moon. And that's another way you can use the moon as it relates to your rut this fall. Enjoy your 2020 rut. I can't wait to hear about it in the comments below, and I can't wait to hear about HuntCast and your use of it this year. Check it out. You won't be disappointed. Well, if you made it to the end of this video, you're obviously interested in Whitetail Habitat Solutions, what I have to teach, and you will love my new web class series. The first one is how to design your whitetail property. It's out now. The link is in the description. I invite you to check it out. It's on my website. Can't wait to hear about it.